Well, hello and welcome to the Radical World Podcast. I'm Jose Leal with my partner, Matt Perez. And today we have what I like to consider a fellow Canadian, because I was a Canadian for 25 years myself, Lorraine Smith. And Lorraine is in Montreal, a place I know well because I had the pleasure, or well, not always a pleasure, of working in Montreal and traveling to Montreal regularly. So Lorraine, welcome from beautiful Montreal. It's nice to have you.
Thank you so much, Jose and Matt, for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Now, you've been, what got you on our radar is the fact that you've been writing some really compelling stuff for a few years. And a lot of our colleagues, ourselves included, have discovered you and followed you for a few years. And lately, a colleague of yours that you've connected with then connected with us and said, have you guys spoken to Lorraine? You guys need to be talking to Lorraine. And so it was a great idea, because maybe you're here because someone else recommended rather than us knocking on your door. I don't know if you would have answered. Either way, I'm really glad that you're here. I'm really happy that we get an opportunity to talk. I've been looking forward to this for a few years, so I really appreciate that you're here. Can you tell us and the audience what got you writing and what your background that led you to the writing that you've been doing?
Sure. Thank you. And it's an honor to be connected. I believe I'll maybe spill some beans. I think it's okay to do so. I think it was the delightful Gary Turner who put us in touch. And anybody who hasn't seen the episode of his conversation with you, they're in for a treat there. And I think, in a nutshell, what got me writing, or more specifically, what got me sharing publicly some of my writing about an economy in service of life, debunking some of the sustainability, corporate sustainability and ESG activity that I'd been involved in, was saying out loud what I was hearing a lot of people saying quietly, sort of bringing a question to the surface that was a little bit taboo, but feels important that we ask it and do our best to answer it. So I'm sort of scratching an itch that a lot of us are feeling. We've got this sort of collective industrial rash, if I may be a bit gross, and doing my darndest to understand where it's coming from and what some of the remedies for it might be, so that we can heal as a society, but in particular as an industrial society. I think a lot about the concept of industrial healing, allowing industry, economic actions to be forces for healing, not just delivering on needs and wants and being a little bit less bad. So that prompt was really just hearing some consistent murmurings backstage that were quite taboo and just starting to say them out loud.
That's awesome. I like the fact that it emerged, because that's the good stuff emerges, right? And it's not something that's necessarily being talked about openly.
Yeah.
Two things. One, you used an acronym. I'm not sure everybody's familiar with that acronym, so maybe you can dig into that a little bit.
Yeah.
And second, creating an economy that's in service of life. Can you dig into that a little bit? But let me first say that absolutely my passion to both position it that way and think of it from the standpoint of life rather than society or work or humans. So please.
Yeah, well, actually, I love these two questions because, in a way, the second is the answer to the first. So let me explain what I mean. So I use the acronym ESG: environment, social, and governance, or environmental, social, and governance. And it's sometimes an adjective in front of disclosures, strategy, investing. So we have ESG consultants, which is what I used to be. And it's really referring to the gamut of, generally speaking, corporate, business, industrial activity that we might call non-financial. I don't totally buy that label. Like, people might say ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is all the non-financial disclosures, whether it be health and safety, environmental impacts, climate, a whole bunch, human rights. I don't really buy the non-financial because that, first of all, sort of says what it isn't, not what it is. And at the end of the day, these things are all interconnected. Finance is interconnected with human rights, with climate, with the environment. But the acronym ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And why do I say that's the question, and the second piece is the answer? Because what brought me to the idea of an economy that works in service of life was working for 20 years. So I began in 2003, so a little over 2 years. Golly, time is doing funny things. A little over 2 decades ago, and officially in the field of corporate responsibility. I left quite reasonably well paid and actually quite fun, but not very satisfying on the soul level job in financial services to go do other things. I went and spun a blanket and traveled across the country on a bus with yarn and visiting shepherds. That's a whole other story, which I long to tell in a more fulsome way one day. But the point is, when I came back to Toronto, which is where I was living at the time, Toronto, Canada, I was ready to re-enter the workforce and do something. As one friend put it, you've spent all your money and you're ready for a job again, right? Yes. But I didn't really want to go back into financial services, but I wasn't too sure why. I didn't understand what wasn't working, but something wasn't working. And so I kind of intuited my way into the field of corporate responsibility, which wasn't called that back then. It was CSR, corporate social responsibility. ESG wasn't even really a term, but it was kind of hatching. And I found myself doing work in strategy. Climate change was becoming a part of the conversation. Business and human rights was really coming onto the radar. Canada has some very big banks, some very big mining and oil and gas companies, as well as some quite renowned retail brands. So we were in the spotlight for those industries, even though Canada isn't exactly an industrial powerhouse. We have a few big players in some sectors. So I found myself getting involved in corporate responsibility, which became sustainability, which became ESG. And all the while I was believing, oh, this is the best way to have impact, right? Work with business to do more good, business as a force for good, all these ideas. Along that trajectory in 2009, I, for various reasons I'll skip over in the spirit of brevity, moved to New York City, continued to do the work now as an independent. So I felt like, oh, good, I can really flex into work that's really aligned, really impactful. And in that context, I was actually brought on board to another firm called Sustainability. And we were doing really neat work with Fortune 500 companies, or some of the really iconic, sometimes private, sometimes public, but really advanced, ambitious companies, pushing the needle on sustainability, ESG, reporting, stakeholder engagement, investor communications, all the good stuff, right? It sounds like a dream come true. But actually, what I was seeing over and over was it was either at best less bad, so kind of harm reduction, if you will, or at worst, and frankly, most commonly, almost like an excuse for business as usual. And I say that with respect. I worked with incredible people, amazing teams, and I believe everywhere I went, I believe the intentions were good. But what we were doing was sort of doubling down on the existing system and finding ways to make it work a little over here while we kept fueling the problem over here. And so, simply put, what does that have to do with working in service of life? I came to realize that we were still working very much within a paradigm that says we work for the economy.
Right.
Our bodies, our time, our minds, our communities, our forests, our oceans, our air, you name it. It can be tweaked, priced, packaged, resourced such that it fuels economic development. And that is life in service of the economy, which the more I sat with it, the less it made sense. And I realized, no, it really needs to be the other way around. The economy needs to serve life. And if we aren't even aware of that idea, then we're definitely not measuring our progress towards that being true. And so around 2022, well, actually, officially October 2021, I finished up a really long run during which I realized I needed to live what I was noticing instead of kind of opining and grumbling within projects. And so I officially stepped away from that formal mainstream sustainability work and set out on a journey, which I'm still on, to be very candid, to see what it looks like for companies, for consultants, for writers, for actors at any spot within what we call the economy to be in service of life so that that economy in turn serves our collective well-being.
That was a long but beautiful answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may say, we think that serving life will serve the economy better. Business
Absolutely.
right now are business hustle. So,
Yeah. You know, in our hearts, we know this. I'll give two sort of obvious reasons why I know this to be true, even though this gets mixed. I mean, one, sometimes it's fun to go back to word origin and see what we've been carrying all along without really noticing. Economy is kind of been a reorganized way of saying looking after our home. That's what the word means, right? So what is meeting our needs and wants if not looking after self, other within our home? And you could call home, you know, the place we live. If it's not obvious, I'm in the process of moving home. But home is also the wider web of life that holds us and keeps us well and enables us to live. So the economy is about looking after our home. That's one reason I'm sort of like, I'm not making this up. That's what the economy was for. But the other reason is I was saying to your question earlier, Jose, about what prompted me to do some of this writing. I've been writing my whole life, since forever. I've sort of, in one way or another, considered myself a writer, but it's only recently that I've been quite public and intentionally public with certain aspects of my writing. And this particular aspect, the reason I know it to be true in my heart of hearts, that we really are here in service of life, is that the number of people who've come towards me saying, that's what I was trying to say. You know, yeah, that's the thing. It's just this sort of expansive, oh, you put a little kind of ticker line under the thought that was in my head. And there's lots of other things that are true. And I'm not the only one saying this, of course.
No.
When there's that level of, like, you know, toe tingling, goose bumping resonance coming from different channels. I'm blessed to speak a few languages. I've worked in a few different regions. I've worked at many different, for lack of a more human term, I've worked at lots of different levels, if you will, hierarchies within organizations, socioeconomic circumstances, across many different sectors. And I can tell you, this is consistent. And can I add a little bonus nugget that gives me a clue here?
Please.
Well, one of the things that has been really igniting for me, as in it's really sort of fueled me and sparked me forward, is when I stumbled into this notion, like, oh, I kind of think the economy should serve life, you know, and it was a bit intuitive, meandering through 2 decades of thinking that's what I was doing, but realizing over and over, that's not really what's going on. When I would articulate this to my more senior industrial colleagues, either my client or like my client's boss's boss, if you will, essentially, whenever I was in an opportunity to speak with a senior executive, and I would say, well, I have this idea that the economy can really work in service of life, they would laugh. There would be this kind of like, well, you know, we got to be realistic, right? And then this cool thing would happen where I'd see this, like, they'd hear the words coming out of their mouths, like, we got to be realistic.
Oh, wow. What did I just say?
And I would see the face, the change, from like, come on, Lorraine, to like, oh. And a couple things strike me now. First of all, that doesn't happen as much. And I think it's because the word is out, not just because of me.
Exactly.
Several people have said to me, you coined the phrase. I don't think I did. I think I drew it down. I'm seeing it more and more in other places. And I don't think those people are copying me. I'm not that known. I think we're collectively intuiting. By the way, we're only speaking English. There's a million other,
Exactly.
but lots of other languages. But for the first few years when I was saying this, sort of 2018, 19, 20, 21, because I'm just saying it all the time. I just repeat myself, basically. I would see it consistently. I would see that laughing and then that like penny dropping. And in senior industrial decision makers' minds, when that penny drops, there is tremendous power, sometimes fear, because it's sort of like, oh, shoot, I just learned I was adopted by aliens, you know, or like, oh no, the world is not as I have been proceeding as if it is. So there's sometimes quite a bit of fear and dysregulation that comes with that. But in more powerful times, there's this kind of like, oh, wow, think of what we could do. So those
I,
clues tell me to keep going.
two things come to mind. First of all, I was having a conversation with someone else who has an initial and then a middle name that she uses, who is J. Kim Wright. I don't
Mm,
know if you've come across Kim
mm,
Wright. Kim is a lawyer and leads the integrative law movement,
mm.
and has been very influential in changing how lawyers see law and,
Oh,
and,
interesting.
and practice law, including a number of tools such as the conscious contract and so forth within that. And Kim and I were going back and forth about this very comment. And it was her that tossed away that comment, those two words to me, serving life.
Mm,
And in our conversation back and forth, I said, there's something deeper. I'm not sure what it is. And
mm.
I know that it's there. I don't know what the language is for it. And she goes and rattles off a sentence with serving life in it. And we kept talking, and I went back to it and I said, you just said it. She said, what did I just say?
Yeah.
And it was serving life. And since then, like you, I've kind of re-seen it many times, and it keeps re-resonating. And
Mm,
it resonates for me not from a economic perspective, meaning from a top-down perspective. It resonates for me from a emergent perspective of, why am I here?
mhm,
I'm here. The things that resonate for me emotionally are the things that serve life.
mhm,
Why do I become attached to the little birds that I feed every day?
mm.
Why do I, take care of the plants that I honor their beauty and feed them and water them and do all these wonderful things? And they feel good to do that,
Yeah.
right? And when I was in corporate, why did I, and Matt has the same experience, why did I defend my employees? Why did I support them? Why did I hide them from all the BS that was happening up at corporate? Because I was trying to serve them. I was
Yeah.
trying to help them. And I think that our organizations have been built without that knowledge, that
Mhm.
it's been a structural process of uh, an intellectual design structure
Yeah.
that uses symbolic language and symbolic structures, rather than this understanding that it's an emergent process of life, our behavior. And so when you asked the questions a week or two ago, you posed the questions like, who's in charge?
Mm,
What are their incentives? And what are we conditioned to believe is good?
mhm.
Because to those three questions, to me, describe the work that we've been doing in Radical and what I think you're pointing to.
Mm,
I think you're pointing to that what I think is good is having a job. And therefore, I need to have a job. And if I don't have a job, I feel pretty miserable,
mhm.
because here I am jobless, right? And that in our society is a pretty awful thing, right? And so what do we believe in?
Mhm.
What is it that we've been asked to believe? And that those beliefs, how do they carry on to or map on to serving life? Because having a job that forces me to do things that are harmful to life
Yeah.
is the opposite of
Yeah.
what's good. And
Mhm.
most of our jobs today are doing things that are not wholly serving life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, this is the puzzle. I mean, may I share my approach to what do we do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because once you pull on it, or what some will say is, once you see it, it's hard to unsee it.
Yeah.
And then it can become, well, this is everything everywhere all the time. What on earth can I do about that? And it isn't just the, like, individual acts add up. I mean, I think that's also true. But it's even bigger. It's like, oh crap. So I'm going to stay in the industrial context. I think there's lots of room for individual, family, church, school. Like there's lots of places to have fun here. But just because of the swim lane I'm in and where my decades of professional expertise are, I will stay, generally speaking, within the corporate strategy, corporate disclosure, investor dialogue, and overall mainstream industry lane, if I may. And so when such a person in such a role as, say, ESG advisor at a global consultancy, or a chief sustainability officer at a Fortune 500 company, let's say, and those are folks I know and love and have worked with, when they see this and can't unsee it, it's quite painful, because they are in a system that does not reward seeing this, does not have room to see this and move forward in very many meaningful ways. So the obvious answers are, like the most obvious ones I've seen applied are quit, retire early. That's a good one. And I say this without judgment, by the way. I'm just like, what are the options? You're an individual making choices. Retiring early, that's a reasonable one. I don't blame people. Quit and do something else, switch careers, try to, you're uncomfortable, move so you get uncomfortable in a different way, but to really face it head on and be like, oh, I'm responsible for the strategic direction of this company's supposed sustainability strategy. And I'm seeing that that's actually part of the problem. And I'm seeing that there's no ESG framework that addresses this. There's no investor portfolio. I mean, the ESG portfolios, golly, I've followed that money. It's just it's disturbing. And anybody who wants to go deeper into my blog, there's a lot there. And please challenge me. By the way, I always say this, and I really mean it. Like, if you see errors, if you're like, no, you missed the really great stuff that money is energizing, please bring it. I long for the day where I write the correction, or I write a piece about the correction. So they see it. Now, what do? I guess my ideal answer today, and here we are at September 2024, this is a moving space, but my ideal answer today is the individual within the corporate setting does not give up. They don't step away just yet. Maybe that's their safest, best option at a point. But first, they try to use the existing knowledge and tools to bring this very profound awareness about the role of the company, the organization they're in relation to serving life. So I took some of my years as a sustainability and ESG consultant, and I kind of did a fun little, actually quite mischievous mashup of the tools and the tips and the tricks. And I created something that's free, open source. Anyone can download it from my website. It's a methodology I call materiality. And anybody who's been in the ESG consulting trenches will recognize the word materiality, but it's usually spelled with an I. I put reality into materiality. So there's reality in this kind of recognizable ESG tool. And I'll quickly sum up why this is perhaps useful for industry folks. Old school materiality, so ESG materiality folks, will be looking for what are the company's issues, human rights, conflict minerals, climate, et cetera. And depending on the sector, they're going to come up with a range of issues. They're going to talk to a range of stakeholders, and they're going to say, this company is working on these issues. That is essentially a materiality assessment. Now there's double, single, triple, give a multiple. They essentially amount to the same thing. You can fight me on that, but I hate to say it, I'm going to win. Yeah. They don't help a company truly center life and then serve it. They might help them better mitigate some of the worst issues outside their four walls, but it still doesn't get at the point. Someone's ringing.
Sorry.
That's all right. When we put reality into materiality, which is what I did, twisting the existing ESG techniques and applying a life-affirming lens, we turn the whole thing on its head and we just ask three simple questions. What does this company say its purpose is? Because the purpose of a system ought to be directionally useful. What do they say their purpose is? What do they actually do to generate revenue? Which is what their real purpose is. So if they say one thing, but they generate money doing another, that's indicative already. And then the third question, what can this company do to serve life? And so concrete example, I ran a few experiments on this. I publish as much as I can on it. I used Google as the first one because they're so, they're a verb. We all do them every day. So let's take a look at our lives in this context. And Google's stated purpose is to make all the world's data accessible to everyone everywhere. That's such a cool purpose. That is their stated purpose. Well, how do they generate revenue? The majority of their revenue, which I'm a little out of date, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars US. So it's a lot of revenue. The majority that they generate comes from selling advertising. So those are not the same thing. Make all the world's data accessible to everyone everywhere, sell advertising. They're not mutually exclusive. Obviously, that's why it happens at the same company. But if you walked out into the street and you grabbed the average 12-year-old gently and said, hello, average 12-year-old, if you wanted to make all the world's data accessible to everyone everywhere, what would you do? Like the first answer wouldn't be sell advertising. And if you said, point out the same things, when you put 20 things in a mix and you put those two things in there, no 12-year-old would say those are the same thing. They are not the same purpose. So let's not pretend that Google's purpose is to make data accessible to everyone everywhere.
And worst of all, to confuse the user of your service as to what is advertising and what is actual content,
right?
What is actual information,
100%. And
which is increasingly what they're doing.
And they're finding, and hats off to the ingenuity of Google. I mean, good gravy. They're incredible. Like I respect the intelligence and I respect the ability to monetize, but I do not respect pretending one purpose while earning revenue through another, which, by the way, is to pay absentee shareholders. Like the shareholders of Google are not doing the work. The shareholders of Google are like, they could be you and me, depending on our portfolios. Although anyone who's followed my work knows I completely divested from the market and my not very big retirement savings is currently devaluing against inflation because it's in nothing, which is perhaps not financially wise, but I no longer felt comfortable investing in the things that the more I followed, even the most ethical portfolios, which mine was supposedly in, it was truly repulsive. So let's not pretend that is serving life. We can excuse it. We can justify it. We can say, well, that's because, or here's why. Okay, those are worthy conversations. They're not serving life. So what does it look like? And I put this into the assessment that I did and made public. When you ask stakeholders, what do you believe Google could do in service of life? To what degree do you believe this company is serving life? And of course, different people in different parts of the world serving different roles in their own way, including those speaking on behalf of different biomes, etc., have very different views. Some quite favorable, but inviting better. Some devastatingly horrible. So there isn't one answer, but I would say if we're not even asking the question, how can this company serve life? The likelihood of transforming it in that direction, and it is a transformation, it's not a tweak, the likelihood is less than zero. It's just not in the cards.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Have you wondered if an organization in the form of a corporation by itself has the capability of serving life?
Yeah.
Meaning that form of structure in all of its investors and hierarchy and boards and everything else, is it possible that structure can actually allow for serving life?
Yeah, I live with that question all day, every day. I'm open to both a yes and a no. I'm open to yes, it's possible. And every actor along that chain would need to be glad for that to be true, right? So that would be investors who were like, woohoo, we poured all of our money into that and it worked. We didn't get anything back, but that's okay because that wasn't our job. That's not feeling too likely. I think it's possible. I think the more likely answer is no, it's not possible. I think we are looking at a massive restructure. We already have corporate structures that provide products and services and employ people and pay people and do cool things that live within different structures. So cooperative structures, employee-owned trusts, different countries around the world have come at this in different ways. But I think we are looking at a major rethink around corporate structure. I think we're seeing the absentee shareholder, no offense to probably almost everyone we know, but no longer having that role. Like, let's be blunt, you didn't really make that money. You're not really that smart. You just either lucked out, you had capital to begin with, you like for some reason, circumstances let you put money where it financializes itself. That's
Right.
not really value.
You're
And
chasing the
so
return, not the value.
that's right. And so, like I'll say, you don't get to do that anymore because that's hurting us. It's hurting all of us, even the super wealthy who have a lot of that financial capital.
And
So
having
no,
been,
the
you've
real
done
answer.
this work. Sorry to interrupt, but
That's okay, please.
you've done this work, and so I wonder how you'd answer this question, because my sense is the greater the return, the more likely the greater the harm to
Hmm.
life, because you've got to cut corners in order to increase the return.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, it's definitely feels aligned with like there's no free lunch or too good to be true. There's awkward truths out there in the financial growth world, but I would almost step outside of the question of can something earn a financial return without being harmful, and step into another series of questions that would be along the lines of what would it look like to be generative, to be life affirming, to enable healing, restoration of a bioregion, of a community, and then holding that series of answers, oh, this would, oh, we'd need this, oh, these things would have to be true. Okay, what have we got? And does financial capital have to come into play here? And if it does it need to grow? And if it does, how much does it need to grow, and who's holding it, and by what means does it grow? And then instead of it being like, high returns equals high harm, but we're still in that paradigm of there's some money and it's going to grow either a lot or a little, we set that aside. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to be really clear here, because it's very easy to point out I'm living in a fantasy, because that's not really how most of the economy works right now. So I want to just draw a really clear distinction between fantasy and magic. I find this really useful. In fantasy, anything is possible, right? I could tell you, oh yeah, just down the hall, I have this really cool troop of unicorns. We have tons of fun. There's a dance room. My friends from all around the world and outer space come in their magic carpets, and we have a party every night. And I could be like, I'm telling you guys the truth. It's a fantasy, but I'm telling you anyway, right? Because I made it up and I feel like believing it's true. Okay, that's fantasy. It might be enjoyable. It might serve a purpose. There's nothing wrong with fantasy as long as we don't confuse it for like strategic planning. Magic is actually based on the imaginal cells of reality. So magic is an acorn. That's a tiny little thing. I got acorns all around here. Where are my acorns? Here's one. Acorns are the seed of the oak tree, right? It's tiny. I can I can drop a teeny little thing. I pick it up. An oak tree, a big mature one that we haven't done anything dastardly with yet, is so big all three of us would have to wrap our arms around it. There's no way we could pick it up and throw it around. They're the same thing. This is magic. It contains the imaginal cells, the true potential of the oak forest, of the oak savanna, of the interconnected biological beauty that is life on Earth. This is real. This is not like Lorraine has some crazy fantasy that this is a tree.
That
It's
is
like,
life
no.
in a nutshell.
Right. Nice. Well done. The challenge we have is that this magic is with us all the time. First, separating fantasy from magic and being like, my unicorn friends are not really coming by magic carpet from outer space. Oh, well. Now that we've established that this is real magic, what is required to unlock the magic? And that is a series of conditions. If I leave it on my kitchen counter, it will never become an oak. It'll be this cute little acorn because I like acorns. What do I need to do to put it into the temperature, the moisture, the light, all the things? No deer comes and eats it. No boot comes and crushes it. So likewise, the kind of transformation we're talking about with our capitalist model is very acorny right now. It's got a lot of magic. It's got, think of the people, think of yourselves and the things you've done, the innovations, the ideas, the dreams, the changes, the connections. This stuff, I get all like super goosebumpy, even just saying it out loud. It's real. This is not fantasy. But the conditions required to unleash that in the spirit of the kind of interconnectedness, the lifeiness, it's big. It's very different from what the banks will sign off on right now, from what kids go to school. So maybe the end of my little soliloquy here, those questions that you pointed out that I put on LinkedIn the other day, the last one is, what are we conditioned to believe is good? Just as you said, we want a job, and we want a good job. And it's not to say that's a bad thing, but it's to invite a stepping back and asking, wait, why do we want a job? What is a job? And what is a good job? And why is it a good job? And why is my reality filtered so
So
that I
that
only see these ones, not in a suspicious, everybody's out to get me, stick it to the man, but like, wait, what else is possible out there? What happens when I take the acorn off the kitchen counter of my world? And it's that invitation for recognizing an entire universe of conditions with our jobs
right.
that I think we are ready to give ourselves permission for.
I would say not with our jobs, but with our working energy.
Love it.
Because I think
way better. Yeah.
right. It's that energy that wants to invest and sweat and do all the things that need to be doing.
Yeah.
But when we all of a sudden narrow that to this one little tiny thing of a job, then we've lost the energy to do the things that serve life. And now we have to work for the job and to maintain the job and to
Totally.
do all the things that means maintaining that job. And Carlos just told us that we've got 5 minutes to go. Okay, this is why we put the 40-minute limit, because I could talk to you for another hour.
Oh, it would be a pleasure.
So I think what you're saying is that the potential for a new system already exists in the seeds of what many people have already been working on. And that seed, acorn in your example, needs to have the conditions to do it. And I've come to the same realization. I always thought that the issue was that we needed the right seeds at the right time. But I think what we need is the right seeds in the right environment. And it's about the environment more so than the seeds themselves. The seeds are naturally occurring. It's just that we've identified them ourselves now as we've been doing the work, those who have been doing this work for years, and identifying what the seeds are. But the conditions have never been promising, never allowed for those seeds to flourish. And whenever they've tried to flourish, the city has come around and cut them off of our median and
glyphosate
and remove them from us, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you see us being able to build those environments?
Yeah, 100%. Knowing we're close to time, I'll give you my kind of cheat sheet for this, because I believe each of us has an incredible role to play within industry and beyond. And each role is different. Just like the forest, I love to play with the acorn, but if you go into a mature forest, you can't count the species, right? And they're all connected. So I like to ask myself 3 questions, and I literally ask them every week. And sometimes folks join me and we do some group workshopping on this. But anyway, I stay true to these. The first question is, what is it I seek to change? Because often in this work, you get like, oh my God, we have to change everything. Oh my God, the whole system, the whole economy, the climate, the everything. And it's like, maybe, but that's a lot. Like, I don't even know what you mean. I don't even know what I mean when I say that. So I ground myself in very specific questions. What is it I seek to change? And I need to be able to answer from what to what. So with this question one, my default answer, although I'm always changing what I change and getting like more specific or wider, but my broader answer on this is I seek to change the number of people on Earth who make senior level industrial decisions, who have never had the thought the economy can work in service of life, to, of course, the economy works in service of life. And I have a role to play in that. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. So my change that I seek is that the number of people who've had that thought shifts from not very many to a lot. and they're energized in service of that. But each of us is changing different things, and that's okay. Getting really crystal clear, what is it I seek to change? And then 2 more questions to help live into that change. The second, and I'll keep this one brief because it could go on, is to try the change on, to articulate with my own voice out loud to somebody who has my best interests at heart. What is it like when the change is true? It's positive, it's present, and I'm the first person protagonist. So really trying it on. It's just the most amazing thing when I talk to industrial leaders and they're like, God, I used to think this, but now I think that, and I have changed everything. And really drilling into that, not in a speculative, it could, I might, but it is now. So what does it feel like when that change is true? And then the third question, and this is where the real power is what is one thing I can do this week to make that true? And say it out loud, tell someone who has your best interests in mind, and go do it. And it could be as simple as call someone and tell them this is what I'm trying to do, right? Or it could be get your website tidied up so you don't look so scruffy and, get it organized. It could be all kinds of things. Some of them may have multiple weeks, multiple months, require investment. Some of them might be something you could do this afternoon. What do I seek to change from what to what? What does it feel like when it's true right now? And what's one thing I can do this week to make that come true?
I can tell you've looked at our website.
I have. I've been landing consistently in a place where the universe knows how to get this done, and we're just here to do her bit of.
Lorraine, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Thank you.
And it, you said goosebumps. I've got them. Thank you.
Aw, thank you. Likewise.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
I'd like to say one more thing. You are a radical, and that makes it warm. And read this book.
Oh, you're backwards, but it's Radical Companies.
Radical
It's
Companies.
Radical Companies.
Yeah, I look forward. Thank you.
I guess if we do this, something. But because we also thought about a lot of the same things you talked about, and by the way, you never said you said everything like a pre-practice sentence, and
universe came to visit me for this one, I guess.
Well, I think you've done this. You've been doing this for a while, and I think you've really nailed a lot of the ways that you describe this, which is really, really appreciated. At least for me, speaking for myself, being able to clearly articulate these ideas is difficult.
Yes.
And we benefit from people like yourself who have the ability and the mastered the art of making the difficult simple. And so it's obvious that that's what you've been doing. And so we appreciate that.
Well, thank you both very much for the invitation and the conversation. I appreciate it. And I hope
that we can continue the conversation.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm just going to let our folks know that we're going to be having a conversation. You mentioned co-ops. And we're going to be having a conversation with Arizmendi Bakeries, which is a group of, I believe, 5 or 6 now bakeries here in the Bay Area who are completely cooperative, and looking forward to that conversation with them, as well as the Industrial Commons folks out of northwestern North Carolina, and they're a group of co-ops that are collaborating, what I like to call a collaborative. And so we're looking to have a conversation with those folks over the next couple of weeks. And I'm looking forward to that. As you mentioned, Lorraine, co-ops are already a form of this type of new movement in the moving forward. We think that they need to grow up a little bit in a different way, because they were formed in a place where they needed to be something a little different than what I think today calls for. But it certainly is a beautiful acorn to start with. And so we're looking forward to that conversation. Thank you again.
Revson Martis made a comment here. Thank you very much for hosting this webinar. And, thanking us very much. Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine. And we will have it back. she kind of said, "I would love it," so we'll have her back.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Remston, for the kind remarks. It's nice to meet you in this part of the trail, and looking forward to walking alongside.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Bye, everybody.